Hello and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug Mackenzie, and on today's session, we're going to be talking about the must-attend event in Fintech, Money 2020. And joining me today is the Editor-in-Chief at Money 2020, Sanjib Kalita. Sanjib, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing wonderful, Doug, and as always, it's so wonderful to be talking to you and looking forward to hopefully meeting up in person soon.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. We've had conversations before over digital channels, but I don't think we've met in person. So this Money 2020 will be special for more reasons than one. But kicking off with that, I'm really excited to just dive straight in with Money 2020, 2021. I mean, can you tell our audience a bit more about it? What are you excited for the most?
Sure, absolutely, and this is probably going to be unlike any other, because in normal times, when Money 2020 is 10 years old now. We've been in Europe for quite a few years as well, and normally what's disruptive about Money 2020 is the fact that we are talking about electronification. We're talking about digital. And I think after the last year, I think what's going to be the most disruptive is that we're going to be live and in person, and I think that is something that we're all very excited about, and we're all looking forward to, because I'd say over the past year, I'm sure I know that you have been following the industry as well as anyone else, and so you're able to join and read all these, very specific articles about things, but then when you get to the broader conversation, you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that, and if you do want to talk to someone else, it's a bit of like, okay, let me go out of this mode and call someone or, email someone. Whereas when you're in a live event, you can hear what's going on and then react immediately, and you can sort of hear the crowd react to things. And it's a very different temperature read, and I think it helps, and it probably helps you guide more things than you in more ways than you would expect. And so just the fact that we're going to be in a room, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It almost feels absurd over the last year, and I think we'd be remiss if before we didn't divulge into more about 2021 and all the really exciting things that we're going to be seeing this late September. I want to kind of talk about your experiences from 2020, and obviously there were lots of various different attempts to make events work. What did you learn from that process in 2020, and how is that going to have an impact on what was going to make 2021 amazing?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful train of thought, and I would say that let me just go into the Money podcast, which Money 2020 launched in 2019, initially as a way to talk about our live events and what was going to be there. And then once the pandemic hit, and then once lockdowns went into place, this podcast became our primary contact, or our primary way of talking to our community. And the interesting thing was that we used to do a podcast once every month or once every 2-3 weeks, and then after lockdown, we just started doing podcasts every week, just to have that consistency of communication with the industry. And within a year, we got 200,000 subscribers, and we got to within the top 20% of all podcasts, including competing with like news and entertainment and all those. And so I was a bit like, why do so many people want to listen to about Fintech? And it was, but that also talks about how important Fintech is to the broader world. It also talks about how much a conversation is important, and so that's one thing. On the flip side, I would say that we did a digital event called MoneyFest in October of 2020. It had great attendee numbers and great, and then we've done a couple more, and we've sort of realized that I think rather than trying to do a direct digital version of a live event with like scheduling and so forth, we found a lot more asynchronous viewing of the events, and I think it was I'm sure you, like myself and all of your audience are just incredibly time pressed, and the demands on our schedule are crazier than ever. So I think having a bit of that asynchronous content was very interesting learning for us.
I think that's such an interesting point to bring up, and it's one of the successes of moving to digital channels is being able to, and especially this, it's being pre-recorded. We have that opportunity to go back and make things perfect, and I think being able to watch things at different times is a string to a bow that no one ever thought of. Everyone knew they needed it, but just couldn't think of what they wanted to say. And it's the fact that obviously everyone's very time poor. Everyone can't attend every session at the same time. To be able to offer that service is absolutely incredible. Now, with that in mind, let's talk a bit more about the Money 2020 and this year. I'm interested, is there going to be a digital element alongside that kind of being in a room and feeling that barometer of excitement?
So I think our team is very very focused on the live event.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of what happens at a live event is a bit of serendipitous connections and running into people, running into ideas that quite frankly, we haven't quite been able to translate, or anyone in the industry has been able to translate onto a digital platform.
Yeah.
And so, while at post event, I'm sure that there'll be some videos and so forth, but it's as you can attest to, a video is not the same thing as being there.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also a bit of like we want people to be there completely in their mind, and it's for a short period of time, but we want their attention so that they can fully engage with the community, and I think that much like how Fintech Finance has built its following, its credibility, its content over the course of time, and so is at a point where you can speak to the audience with a bit more certainty than you might have years ago when you started off.
Yeah.
And I think similarly, having been through what we've collectively been through the last 2 years, having that bit of certitude from a platform like Money 2020 is critical as we look towards what's ahead in the future.
Yeah, and I can completely agree. Having been stuck in this studio bedroom for the last last year and a bit, it will be very exciting to actually get out and about and really experience it in the proper way that it was meant to. And it's something that I think you guys at Money 2020, as you were kind of alluding to, you have that heritage, as you said, over the last 10 years of being able to showcase physical events in their best form, truly. And that's something I'm very, very excited for. Now, with that in mind, then, this is almost a kind of superfluous question, but Money 2020 always seems to have quite a strong theme running through it. From your side on the content side of things, is there a theme that you're really hoping will come through this year's Money 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this year's theme, or it's a bit of philosophy, is going to be quite different from years past. Whereas in years past, for example, a lot of the content might have been focused on specific sectors like payments, banking, lending, and sort of gone transversely across those themes. I think because we had the lockdown and we had the ability to, rather than putting on one show and then jumping right on the hamster wheel again and working on the next show, we had a bit of time to reflect, and I think that collectively, one of the things that we try to do at the event is to try to break down barriers, try to break down silos, to enable more open conversations, to enable more exchange of ideas. And then when you reflect on our agenda, in years past, it might have been viewed as siloed as well. And so we're trying to break down silos, yet we have silos in our agenda.
Okay, yeah.
And so this year we're like, our view was like, okay, let's look into the future and what we would like the world to be like. And then given that as a starting point, what are the elements that would need to be in place for that? And so that might involve a little bit of, for example, the ecosystem, like, who's there. It might involve capabilities and even a bit of the culture of the organization. It will obviously involve technologies as well. And so that sounds probably a bit radical, if you, as one who attends events regularly, but I think we at Money 2020 we do a lot of experiments, and this is an experiment. We hope it turns out well, but I think the idea is to look a little bit into the future and reshape the agenda to be in line with that.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. Fintech has become so ubiquitous across, as you said, various different industries. And it's certainly one thing that stuck with me during the first lockdown we had here in the UK is people weren't able to access their banks in a physical branch. Suddenly Fintech came in and helped that. So we can't really have one year where we're just focusing on one particular aspect. This is the year where we need to kind of be talking about the industry as a whole and looking toward the future. I think that's going to be very exciting. Now, with that in mind, before we've talked before about a report that you yourself have conducted called Fintech 2.0, and that kind of looks at fintech in these tranches and where it's going in the future. So could you tell our audience a bit more about that report? Since we're following that line of where is fintech heading in the future?
Sure, absolutely. So for your audience that might not be as fully aware as I am, having written it, 10 years ago, I wrote a report about innovation in payments, and was able to highlight several things that have wound up coming into reality. And some of those things seemed a little bit crazy back then, but they're actually normal now. And similarly, I think, and that was during the financial crisis. And I'd say similarly, we're at a similar inflection point. We're at a similar point of disruption where we've collectively paused and reassessed what we're doing. And so in that spirit, tried to highlight, okay, what are some of the things that are changing and where are things going, and put together what we call them as 5 building blocks for Fintech 2.0. So for example, you have assets and CBDCs, cryptocurrencies and like. Then you have banking tech stacks, which have traditionally been mainframe and now going to cloud and beyond. And then you have commerce experiences, which 20 years ago, the leap to internet was crazy. Then 10 years ago, the leap to mobile phone was crazy, and then now we're at other points where we're seeing other things that might seem crazy at this moment, but once again, looking out, it's going to not be so bad. Then D, data, and then E is for ecosystem. And as you just brilliantly said, it's more and more people are being pulled into the fintech ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly, and it really does show that the industry as a whole has to cater to everyone, because finance is for everyone. And I'm interested. You did actually mention one part of what you'll be looking at Money 2020 and this year, and I think it's going to be, from a personal experience, it's probably going to be talked about more than any other year previously, and it was something you alluded to in kind of workplace culture and how that's going to be discussed, because I think we really are at a very interesting precipice where we've established a new normal, as the phrase was told all the time on British newspapers. But how do you think fintech firms are going to grapple with that, maybe even the financial institutions? And do you think Are there any talks about that at this year's Money 2020?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of discussion about workplace, the cultures within organizations, and once again, we don't. While we have sessions that are focused on those topics,
yeah.
but we expect that element is going to be scattered throughout discussions, and I'd say that there's also a very, like, the way that bankers are changing their business is different than the way that technology providers are changing their business and culture, is different than the way that startups are changing their business and culture. I like as an example, I was talking to a VC a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago, and one of the comments they made was that we look at startups that are doing radically different things, and at this point we will see that and say, actually, that could happen. Whereas a couple of years ago, they would have likely responded with, well, that's not going to happen anytime soon, so good luck with that.
Yeah.
And then I can rephrase the conversation I had with a banker, a banking technologist who runs an organization that moves trillions of dollars of euros, on a daily basis. And what he said was that during the lockdown, when we had to go digital, when we had to go remote, I was surprised at how much we could accomplish once we got out of our own way. And I think that speaks directly to your point about culture. It is a little bit about, okay, what really matters? Let's focus on what really matters. And a lot of the stuff that we thought might have mattered was in fact hindering us. And then looking out towards the customer, the consumers are feeling the same way. Whether in London, whether in Poland, whether in Africa, they're being forced to be more digital, and if we don't enable it, some other parties or some other methodologies that might not be so good might fill that void.
Yeah, and I think that means that this year's Money 2021 is perfectly placed at this kind of springboard where even the old institutions, as you were saying, the traditional ones, are looking at just reevaluating how everything has been done. And I think there will never be this convergence of openness. I mean, open banking's been talked about for years, but it almost feels like this is the time that we're actually going to be hearing it. And so I'm so excited to be in that room where everyone is going to actually be meaning it. There's going to be no talk for the sake of talk or innovation for the sake of innovation. It's actually going to be people hearing something quite innovative and being like, we can actually employ that. Is going to be, for me, this is why I'm so excited for this year's Money 2020. And with that in mind, then I've got to ask, looking a bit more on a granular scale, are there any speakers that you yourself are excited to hear from? Are there, can you tell us a bit more of the headlines, please?
Sure, absolutely. And actually, let me just, I'm going to be very open here. I was involved in putting together, for example, the first Europe show, the first Vegas shows, and so in that respect, I almost view on the event as a bit like a parent, and now as you know, we're several years into it, and we've had new folks that are putting together the agenda, and so I feel a bit like a parent looking at a teenager, and I'm thinking, part of me is like, okay, I don't fully understand that. I don't know what you're trying to do here, but I can sort of see it. And then I think, like a lot of parents, when you see what in fact winds up happening, you're like, oh, okay, now I totally get it. And so I would say that that has been a bit of my personal reaction, is like, oh, this sounds very different. Yeah. But I can also see the flavors, and so getting at so, for example, more granular levels. Like, so for example, we'll have Anna Boten from Santander keynoting, and which we're extremely excited about. And I think it's globally, Santander is one of those leading institutions that has pushed the boundaries, and so it'll be interesting to hear from her perspective, especially over the last 2 years, a reflection on that, as well as putting that into the context of her, of Santander's long history of being, so I would say, quite at the forefront with like looking at digitization.
Yeah.
And then so we'll also have another speaker that I'm quite excited about is the CEO of Flutterwave. They're from Africa. They're one of the African unicorns, and I think that we, as you've said, we've been stuck in our rooms, but there's a whole world around us, and I think that hearing from Flutterwave will be a great way to once again expand our minds and see, from real life stories about what's happening there and how they've been able to build that business, and because businesses are continuing to be built, and they're doing something right. So I think that's also an interesting story that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be so brilliant to hear, because it is such a high growth area. To be able to hear that is going to maybe put just so many other more mature markets to just suddenly have to listen and be like, wow, we can actually do it this way. We have, for instance, the capabilities, and to hear what Flutterwave are doing with their, their payments and their instant card side of things, it's just absolutely fascinating. So I'm really excited to hear those. I'll make sure to tune into those ones. But Sanjib, I guess we are coming to time. If you could kind of tell our audience, I mean, people already know where to find out more information about Money 2020, but if you could point people in a direction to a site or where they can find out more about the specifics of the show. And I guess actually it should be said as well, for a lot of countries now, if you're attending, you don't need to quarantine. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And as an attendee to Money 2020 Europe, you're able to get around that, some of those restrictions that might be in place depending on whatever country you're coming from. So, any issues with that, definitely reach out as well. But the idea is that I'd say that still everyone should get vaccinated if you haven't already. That's sort of my view on that. But to the extent possible, we want to have as close to what we would consider normal into a live event, the team is so excited to be putting this together. We literally live and breathe for live events, and so we're really excited about hosting in Amsterdam in a couple of weeks.
Oh, I can't wait. So also, Sanjib, thank you so much for your time. It's been so insightful. You've got me very excited. I mean, getting to even go to Amsterdam itself as well is like that extra icing on the cake, isn't it? It's just such a brilliant city to really cater to Money 20's needs. And I think no other city could do it in Europe. So Sanjib, I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person. And also to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course, YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. So once again, Sanjib, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Doug.